Hello, Christian. This week's video is something I've been intending to talk about for a while, and what triggered me to do it now was something one of my students said. I hate lenition. Now, I'm not surprised by that. Lenition can be very, very confusing, largely because it's rarely explained to the learner. What is lenition? Well, you've probably encountered it even if you've never heard the word. It's when you add an H after a letter and the letter changes sound completely. Except that's not exactly it. Lenition comes from a Latin word meaning weakening. The Gaelic for lenition is sévachas, which comes from a word meaning softening or smoothing or calming. I mean, it's closely related to the English word to shave, which is to take something off the surface and make it smooth. In Welsh, the equivalent change is just called the soft mutation or softening. What lenition is just rubbing away the surface of a consonant, eroding the quality of the consonant so that it slowly gets smoother and softer. For example, the main quality of T is t, that it stops air. What the lenition does is it stops you moving your tongue. You do one less thing, you make one less part of the sound. So with T, you stop moving your tongue and you just get instead of t. Similarly, s, your tongue is close to the top of your mouth. And if you don't move your tongue close to the top of your mouth, you get again, another sound. Now, lenition isn't something that's unique to Gaelic. Otherwise, it probably wouldn't have a Latin name. Lenition is something that has occurred in a lot of languages and occurs in a lot of languages. Most of the effects of lenition that we see in English are the effects of historical lenition, words changing over time. For example, the Latin for father is pater. And although German and English are not descended from Latin, they share a common ancestor. Linguists believe that the Latin pater is the closest surviving relative to the original word for father, which was more or less pater, we assume. Now, if you move to German, the word for father is Vater, and the P of pater has become f. It's written V, but it's pronounced f. And as you know, F, PH. So F is a reduced P. It is lenited. Vater is a reduced pater. Now if we move to English, we have father. The P and the T of pater have both been reduced, leaving us father. But if we look at the Gaelic for father, we have ahar. The P of pater has been reduced and polished and eroded away till there's nothing left. And the T, instead of becoming th like in English, has become h, because that's what Gaelic does. Pater, ahar. So that shows us that lenition is a process that occurs over time and can occur to a greater or lesser extent. And this is why in Gaelic, when you look at a lenited consonant, it might be different in different situations because some are more or less lenited than in other cases. How much lenition has occurred to that letter? That is the question. For example, we have the word savan, to save. A closely related word which very many learners of Gaelic will have seen is the word for a barn, because a barn is where you save and store your straw and grain. The word for barn is sol, as in sol mór ostic. So sol is more lenited than savil. Savil, the B has started to disappear. In sol, the B has disappeared almost completely, and we hear its effect on the A before it. It's not savil, it's sol. It has dropped. We can see a similar effect in English, because while we have a word like mallet, which has a normal A sound, we have words like tall, where the characteristics of the L have started to affect the A before it. Mallet, tall. Then we can see what happens when we lenite further, because we have words like talk and walk, where the L can no longer be heard apart from the effect that it's had on the letter before. We know there's an L there because the A is making the same sound as in wall and fall and tall. This is the same thing that happens with sol. The B has no independent sound anymore, but we can hear its effect on the A before it. It has been lenited almost to nothing. It may be that within a few generations the pronunciation has changed so completely that people will just write it S-O-L, sol. But for now it's sol, both in pronunciation and in writing. Then we can look at MH, for example. We have a word savach, meaning calm, peaceful. A-v. But then we have the word saurig, where the MH is disappearing. It's a very faint W. And the characteristic now of the M that's moved on to the A is it's going up your nose. It's become a nasal sound. Saurig. Saurig. That's because the M in saurig is more lenited than the M in savach. If you want to see an example of complete lenition, the best word to look at is la. There are two common spellings of la. The traditional spelling, L-A-T-H-A, has a lenited T. In some parts of the world you might hear somebody say la or la. But more commonly you hear people say la with a long A. La. Because the end point of lenition, if the same vowel is either side of the letter, when the consonant in the middle lenites away to nothing, you are left with one consonant of double length. L-A-A would be the same as L long A, la. That's what a lot of people say now, so that has become an accepted spelling. Now I know this won't tell you how to say things, how to predict how to say things, but I hope it helps you understand that this isn't something entirely arbitrary, and it's not something to be too confused about. Just when you come across a word that's more lenited than another, just accept that that's the difference. This is more completely eroded, and over time it will probably end up eroding away further, because change is a natural part of language, and it's something that we deal with in our own language without problems. So let's just accept that it happens in another one too. Cheery and drasta.